Okay, class, today we're going to learn about naming joints in the skeleton. Okay, class, today we are going to learn about naming the skeletal joints of the appendicular skeleton, and then we'll move on to the axial skeleton. So, joints are simply named after the bones that create them. So in the lab, or in the PowerPoint presentation that I that I have in class, we named the joints of the knee. Excuse me, I'm getting used to scrolling around in this guy. So, specifically, this bone here is known as the tibia. We know that. And this bone is the femur. So the knee joint by name, remember we put the letter O in between two medical terms. So this is the tibia and this is the femur. And when we put the letter O in between, the name becomes the tibiofemoral joint. And if we get closer in, you'll see you have the patella or kneecap and the femur. Both of these joint names are the names of the knee joint, but they're very separate in identity. So this is the tibiofemoral joint, and this is the patellofemoral joint. And you can see where this cartilage meets up with this cartilage of the femur, and so that is the name of the patellofemoral joint. Okay, so again, the knee itself is made up of quite a few joints. You have the patellofemoral joint and the tibiofemoral joint. In addition, some would argue that you have the tibiofibular. This is the fibula bone. So the tibiofibular joint would be this joint right in here. And this is easier to move around with. So again, your assignment is to go through each bone in the body. What I'm going to have you do is be ordered in your assignment. Why is this not? Excuse me, I'm trying to get this to scroll here. Name each joint starting proximal to distal. So we know inferior to superior and proximal to distal is your assignment. So we know, oh, excuse me, I might have to get my mouse instead of my keypad to do this. These are the bones of the foot, and we know the names of the bones in the foot. So you would start with these guys here. These are your phalanges, and these are your metatarsals. Remember, tarsals versus carpals. These are your metatarsals. So starting with the furthest joint away, this is your distal phalange, this is your middle phalange, and this is your, and you only have those two on the big toe. On this one, you have three phalanges. So, I'm sorry, distal and proximal phalanges of the first toe, or the big toe, or great toe. The second toe is here, and these are the phalanges of the second toe, and there's three of them. So we name them the distal, proximal, or middle, and then proximal. Distal, middle, and proximal. So the joints in between the phalanges would be called the DIP, PIP, and then this one would be the MTP. And I'm going to go through those names for you in a second. So metatarsal phalangeal joint, MTP. Metatarsal phalangeal joint, MTP. Proximal interphalangeal, in between. So the distal or the proximal phalange with the interphalangeal joint, and we call this the PIP, proximal interphalangeal joint. And then as we scroll, I'll see if I can zoom. Oops, sorry about that. Zoom a little bit better here. This joint here is the distal interphalangeal joint. And you have to be specific about which distal interphalangeal joint we're talking about. So here's a DIP, but it's the first DIP specifically of the right foot. So you have to be very specific in your notes. So if I have an injury of the distal DIP or the DIP of the right first toe, you have to say that and be specific between right and left in your injury notes, so that whoever reads it knows what you're talking about, and being very specific and precise as to where you're at location-wise on the body. Excuse me. So Can you name all the phalanges of the hand? It's very much the same. You would just do the thumb is the first one. Pretend this is the thumb. Then at the thumb, this would be your distal interphalangeal joint. So we will now work our way back. You don't need to know the names of the bones in the mid-tarsal bones, but these would be metatarsal joints. Tarsals, these are the tarsals. Metatarsal joint. And you would say first metatarsal joint, second metatarsal joint, because these are the tarsals and these are the metatarsals. Okay? And then you have this bone here, tarsal joint. Specifically, this is the calcaneus, and this is the cuboid. So it would be cuboidocalcaneal joint. This gets pretty complicated. You have to know the names of the joints, the names of the bones of the tarsal bones, which you guys have not done yet. And these are the cuneiforms. So we would call this the first, second, and third cuneiform working this way. I'm sorry, working this way. First, second, and third, because this is the first toe. So first, second, third, this will be the first cuneiform joint, the second cuneiform joint, and this would be the cuboid joint. Sounds very complicated, but it's not if you know the names of the bones. And you almost could be creative and make up your own name, and we would know what you're talking about. So as we roll around with the foot, this is the navicular, and this is the talus. So this would be the talonavicular joint right in through here. You guys don't know the names of these bones, but I'm just giving you examples. So those are the bones, and this would be the calcaneotalar joint, or talocalcaneal. You can say it either way. So if we zoom in here, if we zoom in here, we're talking about this joint, and you can see the articular cartilage that forms the joints. It gets very detailed in the foot, and working our way up, this would be the tibiotalar joint. Oftentimes the joint involved in ankle sprains, and where the movement of the ankle occurs is right in here. So when we're talking about dorsiflexion, plantar flexion, and inversion and eversion, that movement occurs at this joint specifically, but it's a combination of joints. As we move down, you'll see some inversion, eversion occurs at this joint and down and through here as well. So when you move, you guys are now seeing the name of the cartilage. We didn't want to highlight that. As we move, the movement occurs here and here for inversion, eversion. And then when we're talking about forefoot motion, that occurs down through here. So moving on up the leg. Can you name these joints? This would be the, get a better view here. This would be the fibula and the tibia. This is the fibulotibial joint, distal fibular tibial joint, or tibiofibular joint. You can say it either way. So moving up, can you find the proximal tibiofibular joint, which is part of the knee? Okay. Proximal tibiofibular joint. And as we learned, this is a syndesmosis joint, where it's somewhat immovable, and we're only naming synovial joints. But if you wanted to name the amphithrodial joints, which are semi-movable, this is known as a syndesmosis. So between these two bones, all the way up and down the shaft, is the syndesmosis joint between the tibia and the fibula. Remember, we're only naming synovial joints in this assignment, but I did want to point that out to you. Here is a syndesmosis between these two bones. It's connected all the way up and down through dense fascial tissue, which is kind of cool. We can show you connective tissue by sliding through here. See if it'll pull it up. Come on, show me the canal. It's not showing the connective tissue there. I'll have to play around with this anatomy some more, but here's really cool anatomy here in the knee, which we're going to show you guys soon. We're going to go over the knee joint, but here is the joint capsule of the knee. And notice it comes in together with the kneecap. Kind of cool anatomy I have here, anatomy application I have here. But let's remove the tissue layers and just look at the joints. Can you name this joint? You guys are going to have to get creative in naming the joint because you don't know the specific names of these bones here. You do know this name. This is the pelvis. So you would call this right now, with your terminology that you know, this would be the pelvofemoral joint. But if you look inside the pelvis, we get specific in terms of the anatomy. And this is known as the acetabulum. The socket part of the pelvis is known as the acetabulum. And so this is the lunate of the acetabulum, and this is a greater trochanter. So this joint has a name as well, which we're not going to go over. For now, you just call it the pelvofemoral joint. And that is it for the lower extremity. Can you do this for the upper extremity?